Tell me a little bit, this whole issue of suicide and mental illness, it's something that traditionally has not been discussed in churches in general. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a stigma, and I think that's part of what Christians need to break, is that stigma. There's a stigma that, as Christians we believe that God changes our heart and our head, fixes our heart and our head. But if we have a broken leg, we still have a broken leg, even if we're a Christian or not a Christian. But what I think many people are beginning more and more to realize is that mental illness is more like a broken leg than a spiritual struggle. And that's a slow learning in the church, but more and more people are beginning to see of the importance of diagnosing, recognizing, and treating mental illness.
And even dealing with suicide, there's the stigma, a lot of people say, well, suicide, you're automatically going to hell. This is something that, talk a little bit about that sort of.
Yeah, different traditions are different as well. In some traditions of denominations, if you commit suicide, you can't be buried in a certain cemetery. That's not generally the case among the Protestantism that would be more prevalent here in Middle Tennessee. Most people would think, among evangelicals and even more broadly, that a person who commits suicide does so out of desperation. They're not in the right mind. God knows that. God can and does forgive even that. And in the midst of all the pain that's there, it doesn't preclude eternal life. Rather, it's a sign of despair in this current life.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important to kind of change these stigmas and things like that?
Well, churches, churches are places. They're supposed to be hospitals. They're hospitals for hurting people who have spiritual struggles, who are receiving forgiveness of sin. But in the midst of that, they also need to find help and encouragement in struggles that may very well be diagnosed mental illnesses. And so I think part of the challenge is to help churches see that their role is to offer the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, but to recognize that good news also extends to people who are sick with mental illness. Can be a healing and a place of encouragement and wholeness for them along the journey.
Right, and they may need more than prayer.
That's right. Well, I think that's an important aspect of this. You don't pray your broken leg away. You recognize that there's going to be medical treatment that's involved. And mental illness, we're not talking about a spiritual struggle, but mental illness is also biochemical imbalances, and we recognize that God gives us doctors and He gives us medical treatment that can be part of the support system the church provides, so ultimately people can journey to wholeness.
Do you think this is something an idea that's changing, or is this just a new concept, being more open to even talking about these issues?
Well, I think the idea is it's changing because I think people are becoming more aware, and I think that's across the spectrum. People are becoming more aware of mental illness, and treatments are both available, and people can often see the obvious positive effects of such treatments. So I think what's happening is people are recognizing that there are spiritual issues people struggle with, but there are also physical issues, biochemical issues, and those issues, just as Christians believe God can heal people, they also believe that God uses doctor to heal people. Well, we believe God can bring people through struggle, but God also uses doctors sometimes as part of that process.
Right. What would you like to add? I think we've covered some good stuff. Anything else that you would like to add, on this topic?
Well, I think right now we're kind of in a conversation about this. There's been Frank Page's daughter in the book Melissa just coming out. We saw Matthew Warren's suicide, and I think my own family's been touched by tragedy. I have two family members I wrote about in my CNN article that really committed suicide in their struggles with mental illness. But I think the good news that the church offers is the hope that God, in His great love for us, brings healing and wholeness. He uses doctors sometimes, but He certainly uses the community of the church. So I'm encouraged people are talking about it and really thinking more wisely about what it means to get to full wholeness in our lives and our journey.
Yeah. When that impacted your family, what did you think? I mean, in terms of the religious component and dealing with the tragedy.
Yeah, well, in both of those cases, there was no real religious component in their lives. For me, when I first came into contact with this, I was a young pastor before I became leading out in research. I first ran into it when I was a young pastor, and I was maybe 23 or 24, and there was a man in our church who struggled with mental illness, and he just kept thinking, I don't need to worry about medication, I need to trust God. And I wanted him to trust God, but I wanted him to trust God that God also uses medicine, but I didn't know how to encourage him along the way. Well, on that journey, he actually took his own life. And I write about that a little bit in the CNN article, and really it opened my eyes to the fact that this is, again, you can't pray, 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 and think that that fixes mental illness. You recognize that there's treatment, there's help, there's community, and there's Christians working together, but at the same time, we recognize that, well, you have a broken leg, it doesn't go away when you pray.
Okay, very good.